My name is Ahmad. I'm Associate Professor in the Business School, and in the Barnet Micro Business Growth Program, I did workshops on business model evaluation and business strategy. So a business model is a device, which could be a written document in Word or a spreadsheet or a diagram, which shows how a business creates value. And what we mean by value is value for the customer, what the customer gets out, what is the offer that the business makes the customer, and also value for the shareholders of the business. So value has two meanings here. And we look at it in specific terms. We map it by types of customers, customer segments, if you will. So for each type of customer that a business has, it would have a separate value proposition. So the first thing we do is try and understand who are our customers. And then we think about, why is it that this customer would buy from us? That's the value proposition. Once we've understood what value we are providing, why is it that the customer comes to us for whatever product or service they need? How do we progress their life? How do we help them achieve the task that they're trying to achieve? Then the second thing to think about, the second key relationship there is, what kind of relationship do we want to have with the customer? Right? How involved is the customer going to be with the organization? So on the one extreme, you have completely remote transactions taking place. This is, for example, a machine where you tap your card or you put in some coins and you get a product out. It's a vending machine system. There's no relationship. It's a simple transaction. On the other extreme, there's high involvement, high contact with the customer. Now, this could be things such as custom tailoring, bespoke suit making, and things like that. But also, for example, providing personal services. Think about surgery. There's nothing more intimate than somebody actually getting inside your body to fix it or whatever. So across the spectrum, there are different levels of contact and intensity of relationship with the customer that a business has. And that really determines partly by what is the value proposition I'm offering. In some cases, the value proposition could be it's fast, it's affordable, and it meets some basic need. In which case, do you really need to have an intimate relationship with the customer? Probably not, because it might take too much time and take away the value of speed that you're providing. So once you've done that, we also think about, how are we going to deliver this value, this promise that we have made to the customer? In the traditional marketing terms, you can think of this as channels to market. In a retail environment, this could be a shop, this could be a website, it could be selling through some social media platform, it could be selling through brokers, through agents, it could be selling business to business, if that's the kind of product it is. So taken as a group, these 4 or 5 questions that we've asked, they allow us to map the customer-facing, the market-facing side of the business. And once we've done that, we then start looking at it at the back end of the business. What does the business need to do? What does it need to have? How does it operate with the people it has and the contractors it has? To say, how are we going to provide that value? How are we actually going to fulfill our promise to the customer? And in that case, you start by looking at it as, what are the key activities that a company has to do? What does it really need to get right in order to fulfill its promise that it's made to the customer by making the offer in the first place? So that activity mapping is quite an important part of it, because the core of the value must be something that the organization has in its control and has expertise over. This could be a very small business, a florist, for example, who says, I make bespoke bouquets for special occasions, for birthdays, anniversaries, whatever. And the promise is everything that I make is going to be, customized to you and the person you're gifting this to. And I listen to what you want to do, and I tell you, I've got these flowers, and I can mix them up. So it doesn't have to be a very big business. We're not necessarily talking about multinational corporations, although they too have to worry about this. But looking at small, medium-sized businesses, what are the key activities that you have to do to fulfill your promise to the customer? Once you've got that idea of the activities that you need to do, then you consider what resources do you have. And resources is a very big word here. We mean, knowledge, information, ability to do things, but also, money. is a resource. Time is a resource. How fast are you at doing something if you've promised speed, for instance, right? And then, materials, machines, that sort of equipment, software proprietary software that you've designed to run an app or something like that. Once you've got those sorts of things, then you've obviously got certain activities that you do which are not core to your business. They're essential in fulfilling the transaction, but they're not core to the promise that you had made. And then you think about it, well, do I have partners, or can I partner with organizations or institutions that can deliver this on my behalf? So think of a small business that is running off selling some product, maybe T-shirts or something, off a Facebook or Twitter or some other social media platform, or through a site like Etsy, or not found on the high street, something like that. And I say, well, I don't have the capacity to deliver nationwide, let alone internationally. But is there a courier service that I could use who have the same degree of care or attention or speed that I have promised in my value proposition? So your value proposition, because clothing is in my head now that I've thought about it, the value proposition could be a bespoke T-shirt. And you can say, well, we customize it. It's a very high quality T-shirt. The printing or whatever in it is high quality. We deliver it in 72 hours or 3 days or 4 days or something like that. Or you say, we deliver it overnight. Now, the partner that you will have is somebody, an organization that can fulfill that promise. They can deliver overnight, right? And they would have the network and the capacity. Of course, a lot depends on whether you can afford it. So that takes us to the next part. How do we cost these businesses? Where do we spend our limited money in order to fulfill the value promise that we had made? And once you've done that for each of your customer segments that you have targeted, then you think about it, well, how do we make money out of it? What are our revenue streams? What can we charge for? And certainly in services or servitized products, in other words, products that come attached with a service, that can be multiple revenue streams. So putting this thing whole together, in the last maybe 16 years or so, we've got this tool. It's called the Business Model Canvas, which was developed by a couple of people who'd studied entrepreneurship for a while. And it's become quite popular. What I've described to you is essentially the Business Model Canvas. Now, there are other business model templates that one can use, but almost all of them will consider these 5 or 6 essential things that I've outlined, and not just filling in the different boxes or labels, but understanding how these are all interconnected. So you start the design process with the person or the people whom you're serving. And what is it that you're providing them? How are you going to provide that? How much will it cost, considering all the resources and activities involved? And then how am I going to make money out of it? Now, when you've done that, you sort of realize whether the business is a viable business. This business offer that you're making is desirable to enough people to make it worth your while, and that they're willing to pay for this. Value, in the way we are thinking about it, customer value is something, an offer of a product or service that somebody is willing to pay for. It's not just a neat and wonderful idea. And in a nutshell, that is what a business model is. Well, one of the things that companies often make mistakes with is to think that their idea, their product or their service, because it's a neat idea, would be desirable by enough people to make it worthwhile. And what we fail to see is how the customer views it and how they're going to use it. So there's a way of looking at these things which looks at essentially, what is it that the person, your customer, is trying to do? What is the job that they're trying to get done with it? And the job changes even if it's the same product. So I'll give you a simple example. As many of us do, I travel from time to time, and I travel for different reasons. Sometimes I'm traveling on university business. Sometimes I'm traveling on business for another institution or an organization who want me to do something for them. I'm also traveling to go on holiday, and occasionally I'm traveling on a family holiday. Each one of these forces me to look at the airline and the choices I have, and the time of the flights and the price of the flights and the comfort of the service that the airline provides in a different way. And sometimes, especially when you're traveling for work, The schedule, the time is very important, because you need to be somewhere at a certain time, and you might need to be back at a certain time. So that's your major constraint. And, the expenses are paid by the organization who's sending you, so that's not your worry, that's their worry. Okay. But if you're choosing a family holiday, and maybe you have young children or adult children, or it's just you and your spouse or whoever it is, you might be looking at comfort. You might be looking at saving costs. You might be looking at the length of the flights. That might affect the choice of destination that you have. So an airline that does short and long haul, which many airlines do, their customers come to them asking different questions. They come to them saying, "Can you get me somewhere on time? And this is the time. I've got to be there by 9 o'clock in the morning, or I've got to be back by 8 o'clock at night," or whatever. Or you're asking them, "Can you take me there for the right amount of money? Can you take me there with reasonable comfort? Oh, it's a long flight. I'm flying 9 hours away. Can you feed and entertain me and keep me comfortable?" And these questions, if the airline is not thinking of, and the airlines do, by the way, most of them anyway do realize that. If you're not thinking of that as a service provider, that the same customer might be using you for a different job or a different task, you will create a monochrome view of your customer. And that means you'll create one type of business and try and squeeze everybody into it. Now, if they have no other alternative, they will use you because they have no choice. But the moment there is an alternative, the moment somebody realizes there is an unmet need here, there is a task that's not being fulfilled for the customer properly, people will leave, because what they're trying to do is get something done, whatever it is. If you think about why we buy a sandwich for lunch, or why we buy a house to live in, this is always to do something, to achieve some task. Nobody wants to just own a sandwich, and as much as people might think, owning the house is not the point. People buy a house for shelter, for investment, for whatever reason, to have space where they can have their family visit them, or whatever. There's always a job attached to whatever you're selling. So understanding that is extremely important, because that is the value that your product or service is providing the customer. Yes, there are different ways of looking at how you start a business, how you try and solve the problem for your customer that you're doing. And sometimes we think about it as you have a idea, you do some costing, you think about who is likely to be interested in that product, and you launch. And sometimes you might sort of say, well, this requires a lot of money, so I have to go now create a business proposal and raise lots of money and so on. And that's sort of traditionally how we think about how businesses start. In reality, more businesses start by people trying to solve a problem, fill a gap or something that they feel is inadequate, by trying to solve the problem with what they have, what they know, and whom they know. And this is sort of thing that comes out of research done at Darden Business School, and it's called effectuation. So the effectual approach to entrepreneurship says, start with what you have, and whom you know, and what you know. So this is, your own personal raw materials, assets, skills that you have, people that you know who can provide information, additional skill, some kind of support to start the business, and then what is the solution you can come up with. So I'll give you examples of businesses that have started this way. In North America, there's a moving company called U-Haul. And the story behind it is that U-Haul essentially started because this man who was discharged after the Second World War from the U.S. Navy, I think, was traveling across the country to set up home near his in-laws' family, and they couldn't rent a one-way trailer to take all their stuff with them. Nobody was providing one-way trailers. You could take one and bring it back, but they were only going one way. And in the long journey that they were, this drive that they had across, they were thinking about how could this problem be solved. And they came up with this idea of the U-Haul business, where you have you have hubs in different parts of the country where trailers can go and be parked, and then somebody in that city or that part of the city rents one and takes it somewhere else where there's another hub, and that's how it started. Staples, the stationery store, was essentially somebody looking at was actually in the supermarket business, was looking for a job in a supermarket, and just recognized as he was looking at it that the stationery shelves were constantly out of stock because the local area business people were coming and buying their papers and office equipment and stuff like that from that place. And he thought, well, that's maybe there's some business idea there. That combined with the coincidence that at one stage he was writing a proposal, it was a long weekend, and he ran out of ink. He went looking to see where I can buy some ink. The stores that were open didn't have the ink that he needed, and many stores had closed because it was a long weekend, and they closed up early. And so this idea that there is this possibility of supermarket for office equipment and office supplies, and this always availability in everything that you need being available, combined in his mind, and this idea of Staples came along. So you're looking at a problem that somebody experiences in just doing stuff that they need to do. Okay? And then you say, well, how can I solve it? What can I do to solve it? So you can start by whatever little bit you have. Zappos, the online shoe business, was started off by somebody experimenting, trying to find out whether shoes could be sold online. So he went to his local shoe stores around where he lived, said, look, if I bring you business, would you supply me? And they said, of course we would. So he said, can I take photographs of the shoes that you have available that I'm going to sell? He made a very simple website with these photographs of these shoes and a price. And every time he'd get an order, he'd run down to the store where he'd seen the shoe, and he'd buy it and package it and sell it. And so it was costing him money to do that because he's buying at retail price. But once his order book got to the point that he couldn't keep up, he realized there was a viable business, turned it around into a proper business, and landed. So the initial investment, if you will, wasn't he borrowed whatever, £20,000 or £50,000 or something like that to start a business, experimented with the money that he had, with an idea that he had, to try and work out if the business if people would buy online. And it turns out that we don't mind buying shoes online. There's lots of people doing it. Zappos then sold off to somebody else for a multi-million-dollar buyout. But that business started with one transaction to start off with. And there are many other examples of these things. So the approach to starting up a business with what you have, what you know, whom you know. And then you look at it and say, so I've also mentioned something here, which let me formalize it. This investment that the people made initially in the first transaction, in the sort of prototype of a business, that is something based on, because you are the only person there, you're the entrepreneur. You look at it and say, what is it that I can afford to lose? Not happy to lose, because we're not happy to lose anything. But what can I afford to lose? It could be £100, £1,000, £10,000, whatever it is. And that's the money that you risk. That's the money that you experiment with. That's the money that you iterate. Say it's £100 that you can afford. You do something with £100, the first small step towards testing the feasibility of a business. And let's say it doesn't work out. You've lost £100. Well, you could say, okay, now I've learned something. I've learned this doesn't work. How will I do it the next time? Next time I've saved up £100, I have something else to experiment with, something else to try. And so you build. It's not so much that the £100 is lost, it's that the £100 is the price of the lesson you have learned. But you're not carrying the burden of £50,000 investment by friends and family or some investor who's wanting returns before your idea is proven to work. So this concept of what you know, whom you know, what can you do, and your affordable loss, and a couple of other things that sort of work on this idea of bringing in other people into your business, not necessarily supporting or convinced of the idea of a particular business, but willing to contribute something to the advancement of the idea, finding out how this business might eventually work out. So there, that whom you know part, people are bringing in maybe their ability to do a blueprint drawing for you, or to do some experiment for you, or to do a bit of marketing for you, or do a little logo drawing for you, or doing a bit of costing for you. And so you're bringing in these people whom you know to contribute a few hours of their skill. Some of them will possibly become partners in the business, and then their knowledge and skills and whom they know expands the realm of possibility for what you can do. And in this way, we see a lot of businesses that iterate their way from the kernel of an idea, from the small spark of an idea that saw something was needed, into a business that's viable and that's profitable. The business environment is actually quite important, because part of it is to understand what industry or what business you're in. Okay, so let me start with a little example. Let's imagine this utopian world where everything that you needed to done, all your obligations had been done. Even your ironing had been done, and it's a Friday night, and you have £200 in your pocket. And what are your options? What can you do? You have this leisure time with nothing and £200 in your pocket, and you can say, well, could go to a fine restaurant, could invite a lot of friends over, order some nice food and a few bottles of wine, and binge watch some movies, have a Godfather night or something. You could say, I'll hop on the train and go hill walking. Or you could, see if somebody was available to give you some private yoga lessons. You could go to the theater. You might be adventurous, and you could see if there's a last-minute flight available for a weekend somewhere, an hour or two's flying time away. Now, in which world would you think that a restaurant competes with a train, competes with a plane, competes with yoga, competes with the theater? If you were a theater company, you would never think of an airline as your competitor. But in this scenario that I've given you, which is a little bit far-fetched, but not that much, all of these companies are competing for that part of the customer's wallet which is labeled fun times. So understanding what business we are in, and then which industry this is part of, is quite important, because if you just looked at it, my examples that I've given you, the yoga instructor would think of their competition as being other wellness people. The theater will probably think of their customers as other entertainment businesses. The airline might think of the train as a competitor, but they definitely not think of a restaurant as their competitor. Right? So understanding where we are and what is it that we are asking from the customer. Spend what time we are. In this instance, the business that the customer that I've outlined is essentially saying, I have time to spend, and I have a limited amount of money to spend. What do you have to offer? And all of these businesses have potential offers available to you. So if you're a sporting goods company, you're suddenly saying, well, this is the kind of person I can sell some hill walking shoes to. So now I'm competing with these other people. If you're that shoe retailer, you're saying, well, what business am I in? The shoe business? Am I in the entertainment business? Am I in the fitness and sports business? Am I in the fashion business, because we wear shoes for comfort and fashion and to achieve different things, to dance, whatever else. So understanding the industry you're in is quite important in that sense. And then understanding, what are the characteristics of this industry? How easy is it for people to enter this industry and steal my lunch? Because I've just created this offer in a particular industry. It starts making money. It won't go unnoticed. People will say, this is how you make money here, and they will imitate. Is it possible for me to make it difficult for them to enter the business after I enter the industry after I've entered it? And there might be intellectual property. There might be some very special knowledge that you have that other people cannot have, that comes from experience, from so the chef whose special recipes or special style of cooking can't be imitated easily because you don't know how the chef does it. She has evolved these recipes over years and so on. So that understanding of, how much is that industry protected? Because if it is not, and people can pile in, the profit that you thought you're going to make is going to disappear because the competition will come very quickly on price. So that's one issue. The second issue is, who in this transaction is in the position to negotiate price. Now, this is not a bargain in the sense that you stand there haggling with the restaurant and say, this chicken that you've got for £14, I'm going to offer you £12 for it. But it's negotiating price in the sense of not accepting your offer, not booking for your restaurant and going to a competitor or going somewhere else to do that. So customers negotiate essentially with their wallet. They either spend it with you or they spend it somewhere else. Or if they don't have to spend it, they don't. They defer. I'll go to the restaurant next week. So in this way, the dynamics of an industry, whether the suppliers control how much money is taken out, how much they can keep, whether the customers do it, how easy it is to come inside the business. Who else is in the industry who's providing something very, very similar to me and therefore is my immediate competitor? This is sometimes referred to as strategic groups. Right? These are people who are offering more or less the same thing. They're substitutes for what you do, or maybe exactly the same thing. And their offer, the differentiation that they offer, their brand, whatever, compared to yours, their price compared to yours becomes an issue. So in the industry is important in that sense. And then there is outside that, there's a general business environment. This is the world as it is right now. You can think of it as technological changes. And even if you're anywhere in your, say, late 20s or so, you've seen a couple of these changes take place. The way we shop has changed. The pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic has had a huge transition. Not that people weren't buying online before. Online retail was, expanding at, very, very fast pace. But even those people who were somewhat reluctant to buy online ended up converting to online purchases. So there's a big jump in the number of people who are comfortable buying online. Now, once you've done that and you realize that there are no monsters to bite you and things that you've asked for usually come back, that then, even if you start walking down to the local shops, that also is now part of your buying habit, of your shopping habit. It's you've broken that barrier as a customer. As a business, you suddenly realize, this person who used to come to me because they were not happy with the online transaction, they didn't know what was happening, is suddenly buying online as well. So they might come to me once in a while now, and once in a while they go online. I'm losing part of this customer. So technological change in that sense. If you're making something, the enabling technology, everything that we have, what I'm wearing right now, where I'm sitting, this room where we are talking, it's all technology. We don't think of it that way, but it is technology. It was made somehow in some way. And if there are improvements being made in the enabling the technology that allows these things to happen, the weaving of the cloth, the making of the floorboards, whatever, that changes the way companies make their products. And what is now, what was perhaps too expensive becomes affordable. What was a luxury becomes affordable. What was just an idea becomes a reality. A lot of these concepts that we had 30 or 40 years ago. I mean, we thought we were going to be living on the moon. We are not, but we're doing other things with the technology we developed going to the moon. Microwave ovens, for example. And that changes the way prepared food is now sold to us. So technological change is a big thing. The economic environment, how comfortable are people spending money on whatever product or service that you have because they have confidence that they will still be employed. Their income will mean the same thing, and by that I mean purchasing power, so the rate of inflation and so on. So when you take all of these things together, behavior over generations, social change, what is acceptable, what is unacceptable, which ingredients damage the earth and therefore we won't use them anymore, what social behaviors were unthinkable before and now are considered normal, or the other way, So that changes the way we evaluate as consumers, not perhaps often consciously, but just instinctively, the offer that somebody is making, whether it's a product or a service. So if businesses ignore this, and if this is not sort of the background canvas on which their decision making is taking place, then they are in danger of misunderstanding what is going on, and therefore, taking their business down a dead end. And that is probably the most important reason why you need to have an idea of what the business environment is about, so that your decision making, which is future oriented almost always, right? We don't make decisions in the past. So you can see, or you can forecast to some extent, how the world is changing and be part of it. Ideally, you're a change maker yourself, but if not, you're a part of it rather than somebody who's drifting further and further away. So yes, there are a number of ways that businesses can compete successfully. Sometimes it's just the availability. You're a local business and you serve a local market. But if you package these things together, there are maybe 2 or 3 ways we can think about that. And the obvious one is businesses compete on price, and people are frequently motivated by the price of something. Now, in order to compete on price, a business has to manage its costs, because the price is not as important as the cost. This determines, and especially if you get into an environment where everybody's discounting, so the prices are coming down. If your costs are high, then sooner or later you'll be at break even and then below. And if other people have lower costs, well, they're still they might be making less profit, but they're still profitable, and they drive you out of business. So competing on price is essentially competing on cost. And when we're talking about cost, size helps. For small businesses to compete on cost is quite difficult, because they don't get what we call the economies of scale, which is the reduction in per unit of fixed cost. So that's one way to compete. The other way is to make yourself distinct from everybody else in some way. It's referred to frequently as differentiation. My business, my service, my product is different from everybody else's because it meets the customer's needs in a specific way. It could be in an elegant way. It could be in a way that provides some emotional or psychological comfort, which brands do, for example. Exclusivity of brands, and the idea of something that is handmade, customized to me. So think about the tailoring services that people provide for occasions, wedding dresses and things like that. But also, if you win the lottery, or your business comes through, your ship comes in, you might go down to Jermyn Street to have your shirts made. You might go to Savile Row to have your suits made, because the lapel inside would not have a brand name; it would have your name. It was made for you, right? So that's a differentiating factor. This is not a labeled thing that I've bought. This was made for me, and of course you pay the price for it, because that's what you're buying in that sense. So differentiation itself can work in at many different levels. One is this highly exclusive, bespoke way of doing it. The brand that creates value for certain ordinary products. You can, take a plain white T-shirt, might sell in a supermarket or in a discount store for £5.99 or £6.99. The moment you put a logo on it, especially a big logo on it, it now sells for £29.99. Maybe you are on a discount if you're lucky for £99.99. It's the same T-shirt. I've actually been to the factories where they're made. It's the quality of the T-shirt depends on 2 or 3 things: the weight of the cotton, and the stitching. The fundamental cost is not that much. It's the brand that provides the value, the differentiation. So what is it that you're providing? Sometimes differentiation is some dimension of quality. It could be durability. It could be meeting specification. It could be the status symbol that goes with it. It could be the speed at which it is provided. It could be how it meets, it's convenient in some way. There is some form of thing which separates you from the others. There are many furniture companies in the world, many very, very fine furniture companies in the world. But the moment you say, furniture, most people think IKEA or IKEA, depending on how you pronounce it. Their furniture is very well designed. It's, for what it is, it's reasonably priced. It's definitely not the most elegantly designed furniture in the world, and it's definitely not the cheapest furniture in the world. It meets a certain need, and the differentiation they provide is this. If you needed to furnish a room or a small flat or a big one in one day, where would you go? That's the differentiation. It's the availability. So the design is good, the price is good, design has lots of competition, the price has lots of competition, but this idea that, I need to fix up this room today, where can I possibly go? Well, you can go to IKEA, put everything on the roof of your car or in your van, and there is your room furnished. Right? So this idea of differentiation is quite important. The other way that companies can compete in ways is to, and this is probably a part of differentiation, is to think about what job or what task that they're helping their customer do, and to focus on that and not on the peripherals that go with it. The core benefit, the core advantage of that product that the customer is looking for. So if you're a small business, one of the things you have to do very early on is not to think about imitating what everybody is doing, but to say, what do I have? What are my resources? What skills, knowledge, information that I have that I can use? What is it that I can do? The quality of my service, the way I greet the customer if it's a physical shop or something like that, the way I help them understand their problem and sort it out, because that can't be imitated. And the relationship that you build with your customer is then a psychological link between you and the customer. And it could be for some very mundane products. Some of us have habits like, always getting a morning coffee from the same cafe as we get off the train for work or something. Why do we do that? It could be because of habit, because of location, or it could be because the person behind the counter, always greets us in a certain way, has developed a rapport over the years with us, so we find obliged to go there and deal with them. That, these bases of competition shift. So it's an idea to map them in some way. How is competition in this industry usually done? What is the basis of competition here? I'll give you an example. So if you're buying a bottle of wine, for example, most wine is sold on, the type of grape, the age, all the sort of technical bits, the house, who's made it. I mean, it doesn't matter that most of these are owned by some multinational corporation. We just still go with the label. It's a certain vineyard, certain house that's made it. That's fine if you're a wine aficionado, but if you're somebody who's less literate in the rituals and mysteries of wine, that's intimidating. And so what do? You maybe say, it's too much, I can't think of it, I'll buy something else. I'll pick up something I know. So you go for an alternative, some other kind of alcohol. Or you defer thing, I'll ask somebody else to buy it, I won't. What if a wine company was to sort of say, we'd take away all this nonsense for you, take away all this choice for you, and create a brand that is easy to choose, easy to select, that reduces your choice to red, white, or rosé, and has sort of this idea of lightheartedness and fun attached to it, as opposed to seriousness and you need to know your stuff. And that was what I'm describing is the genesis of Yellowtail. Lots of people sort of think of it as unworthy or whatever, but for people who are not schooled in wine, that's brilliant. And it sells very well around the world for that reason. So another thing that you can think about in how to differentiate is remember that you always have more non-customers than you have customers, no matter how big the brand is. So can you address, can you bridge something for the people who are not buying from you if you understand why is it? If it's because this product is too complex, one way to compete is to simplify it. So there are many ways of doing that, and it's the approach that you take, in a way, to how do you create value for the customer.